Hello and welcome to another edition of Mosaic, an African American perspective. I'm your host, Deborah Milo. Today we are honored to have with us County Executive Ike Leggett. From a humble beginning growing up in central Louisiana, where he was raised in a 3-room house with 12 siblings and no indoor plumbing or electricity, he rose to become the first African American county executive in one of the nation's richest and most prestigious suburbs. Welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
You have an incredible story, growing up as 7th of 13 children and raised in a 3-room house. Can you tell me how that shaped you to be the person you are today?
Well, let me go back about the 3-room house because talking to my grandkids, they were thinking 3 bedrooms or 3 rooms outside of just plain 3 rooms itself. They were thinking some other concept. And so even with my daughter, I would tell her about this for a number of years, and I actually have a photograph of the house. So it wasn't until on a family reunion that I actually took her down to the home in Louisiana some years ago, and I showed her the home. And then it really was driven home to her at that point in time. But prior to that time, I think she had a concept, even though you would say 3 rooms, her mindset was, well, he means 3 bedrooms or something else, not 3 rooms, period. So It was a rather small house.
So how did that shape you into the person that you are today?
Well, I think it was out of my mother, who taught, I think, 3 things for me in that sort of humble, difficult beginning and background. One, the value of hard work. I mean, the people in that community, poor, all worked very, very hard. From the time that I was very small, picking cotton, hoeing cotton, tomatoes, you name it, it was just hard work. But she instilled in me the value of hard work. It was a very religious community. The minister of our church lived literally across the street, and we were all poor. And so there was a second value, I think, was the value of ethics, morality, and your spiritual life. And I think the third one was hard work. People just instilled the third one was education, that people instilled in you the value of education, knowledge base. And sometimes people confuse that with only exclusively talking about formal education.
Right.
And I've been fortunate to have a rather long history in education, formally. But many talked about just simply learning from others, whether formal or informal. So the 3 things that I think I got from that community, my mother especially, hard work, spiritual and moral, ethical values, and your religion, and of course education. And that provided the foundation, I think, to allow me the opportunity to expand from that point.
Amazing. So your mother had such a considerable influence on you growing up. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that she might have said, some of the pearls of wisdom that she might have given you in addition to what you've just shared?
Now, I just shared those 3 things, hard work, education, moral and ethical values.
Right.
It didn't mean that I learned them all and accepted them all the first time she tried to explain that to me, because I was a rather rebellious child, didn't listen very, very much, and had a very difficult childhood, not just from the standpoint of poverty, but illness and you name it. I had all those challenges and difficulties as a young person. But she always said something to me, you're really much smarter than you've acted, because I would act one way, but she reflected on the value that I was very smart in many other ways. So she would constantly say to me, you're much smarter than that. You can do better. And I didn't really embrace that initially, but it was something that she instilled in me very early. Because if you look, for example, at my high school performance in high school, I had a difficult challenge getting through high school. I was the quarterback of the football team. I understood all of the difficulties that you had in how to design plays, how to execute, how to lead out on the field. But in the classroom, I never would reflect that. But if you provided me in a sort of informal setting to talk about different things, I could tell you about all the baseball players, all the football players, what their batting average is, all the things, and figure that out. And people are like, well, why could this guy apply this in the classroom? And so she would constantly say to me, and my high school football coach, you're one of the smartest kids that I've ever met. It was not reflected in my grades. It wasn't until I was actually trying to go to college that we had a sort of a transformation. And here's how it occurred. My high school football coach said to me, you should go to college. I was thinking, well, I should go to military, get a job, whatever, and not having any great opportunities from that community. He still said you should go to college. So I got on a bus and drove down from Alexandria, Louisiana to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and walked up to the business office and said, I'm here to participate in a work-study program. And the work-study program involved a prospective student prior to the first year of college to work during the summer, and it would allow you to live on campus, and it would apply everything that you earn in terms of book tuition for the fall.
Okay.
And so I went to the business office, I'm here to participate in this work-study program. And they said, well, where's your letter of authorization? I didn't have anything. You know. They said, go away, can't accept. I came back an hour later, where's this transcript, where's this, all this? Nah, go away. I came back a third time after lunch, same thing. Finally, the fourth time, at about 4:30 in the afternoon, the assistant business manager said, listen, I'm sick and tired of you coming back and forth to this one, asking to participate in this program. And we've said to you, we have no slots available, you're not eligible. And I stood there and I pleaded with her to allow me to work. So she said to me, here's what I'll do. One of the outside maintenance crew has departed, and we need some help with them. You're not in the program, but we'll give you all the benefits if you would work with them. Now, outside maintenance crew literally meant cutting the grass and picking up the trash around the university campus. And I did that. But I made up my mind in that 100-degree heat in Louisiana, Baton Rouge at that time. I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. I said, the only grass that I'm going to cut the rest of my life would be grass on property that I own. So I made a conscious decision to say that I'm going to apply myself academically, look at education as an opportunity, and I went for it, just like that. And by the time I left, I was actively engaged as a student leader. I became the president of the student body, actively engaged in the civil rights struggle, met people like Dr. King, went into the military. I was also involved in the ROTC program there. I was the deputy and brigade commander of the ROTC brigade campus. So I had the honor, at one point in time my senior year, of being the student government president and the head of the ROTC brigade. Two positions that are generally in opposition.
Right.
I had both of them. First time it ever happened. As a student leader, I'm actively engaged in civil rights struggle against the war in Vietnam. On the afternoons, on Mondays, and most of the weekends, I'm literally marching ROTC brigades around the campus in preparation of going to Vietnam.
Right.
At the same time.
At the same time.
Because the reason I was so interested in the military was because as a young person, one of the few areas where I saw that African Americans had this sort of pride and dignity was the military.
Right.
And so I was fascinated by it.
Right. So
I wanted to be a military officer. So in any event, I made up my mind to apply myself academically. So I became an honor student, an honor ROTC graduate. I ultimately served in Vietnam, became a captain in the military. I got out, decided to go back to graduate school, and by the time I graduated from law school, I finished the head of my law school class. So people looked and said, wait a minute, this is the same guy that barely did get out of law school.
Right.
So I say all of that to go back to the point that my mother made. You're much smarter than you've reflected. All you have to do is simply apply yourself. So I went from a person who barely did get out of high school to finish #1 in my law school class at Howard University. And with 3 other degrees.
Amazing. And according to, of course, everything I've read about you and about your wonderful career, it's all about perseverance, which is what it takes. In the 60s, while you were attending Southern University, you had a chance to meet Dr. Martin Luther King, and you were going to talk a little bit about that. And you met him twice, from what I understand. Tell me about that.
Well, the first time I met him, it was in high school. He spoke at a teachers' convention in Alexandria, Louisiana. And I met him just sort of passing.
Okay.
And the second time was in Blue Ridge, North Carolina, where I was working in a camp during the summer. And each time, especially the first time, the thing that amazed me was how eloquent and how directly he spoke almost to each person there. And so there were thousands of people in this big auditorium. And I thought he was talking to me. You know, it was like he was talking directly to me. And I can remember that. And he had such a powerful voice. And keep in mind now, when I say powerful, today we have all the technology in the world. We have sophisticated microphones and sound and amplification system.
Right.
They had very little of that, very little of that. And so this man, and he's a relatively small man. That was one of the things that surprised me about it. He was short. You know, you think that.
Right. That's
very
right.
short.
That's right.
And so this little short guy, preacher from Atlanta.
Right.
I didn't know too much about, because it was, oh, this guy's speaking, let's go. You know, someone said Dr. King. It just didn't register me at that point in time, at least in high school. And this little short preacher speaking so eloquently. And I thought he was talking to me, and that was just like a transformation for me in many ways. So it was a wonderful experience.
Oh, it sounds like it. It sounds like it. I read an interesting story about how you were able to enroll, and when you talk about your enrollment, it's just amazing, and it makes me wonder, what would you talk to young people, because you know some young people, for some reason in this generation, it seems as though that they have this sense of, well, this is what they deserve. This is what their parents are supposed to do for them.
Well, there's a two stages to it, not just to the young person, but to the parents and to the adults. The first thing to the parents is that not to give up on your kid.
Right.
And my mother was smart enough to say, well, you know, he may not reflect the values of what I'm teaching now, but at some point in time, he might.
Right.
And I have confidence that he will.
Right.
And so the parent, on the adult or the supervisor, whomever it may be, must continue to instill those very positive messages to the young person. The second thing the young person needs to do is to be prepared to work to put yourself in a position not to make big mistakes. And what I mean by that is that once you make a big mistake, it's hard to overcome that. There were never any arrests or any kind of serious challenges in my life.
Right.
I remain in the game. So if you're in the game long enough without striking out totally, then you got an opportunity to ultimately get home. And so what I mean by that is that kids today, maybe not striking out totally, but when you're engaged in, you know, difficulties and drugs, in some of the more destructive things, that's a big challenge to overcome. And so you have to avoid those big mistakes and stay in the game. If you're in the game long enough, not make the mistake, the system and people who are there to help and to assist you may give you that opportunity at some point to overcome. So my message to young people, don't make the mistakes.
Right.
You know, look to the moral and ethical things in your life. Stay in the game. Do not get engaged in some of these very destructive behaviors, because when you're talking about mistakes today, many of them can be deadly. Many of them can cause long prison terms.
That's
and so you have to keep them in the game.
That's right.
And so if you stay in the game long enough, if you are prepared and work at it, you have an excellent chance. But it's a two-way street. The parent continue to believe and continue to instill and continue to give that positive message. From the young person, to stay in the game, continue to listen. You may not get the rewards today, but if you stay there long enough, there's a good opportunity that you will.
There's that perseverance again, like you said, stay in the game. And with that, for those of you who have just tuned in, you're watching Mosaic, an African American perspective. I'm Deborah Milo, and we're talking with County Executive Ike Leggett. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll return shortly with more on the successful career of Ike Leggett.
Salad on Saturday, fruit on Friday, bubble Thursday, water Wednesday, touch your toes Tuesday, let's move Monday, swap us next Sunday. 60 minutes of physical activity a day and eating well can help get your child healthy. So keep them active and eating well every day. Get ideas, get involved, get going at letsmove.gov. That's letsmove.gov.
Serving your community is a great feeling. The Montgomery County Volunteer Center can connect you to hundreds of volunteer opportunities available throughout the area. Are you a student, senior, professional, community group, or business looking to serve? Simply visit our website to select what's right for you and get great ideas from past projects with our volunteer toolkits, or share a success story of your own. The Montgomery County Volunteer Center. Make an impact in your community. Where will you serve?
Welcome back to Mosaic, an African American perspective. I'm here with County Executive Ike Leggett, and we were having such a wonderful conversation. This is just such a wonderful, wonderful moment. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about your career. You were elected in 1986 as the first African American to the Montgomery County Council. You went on to serve 3 terms, and then in 2006 as the first African American county executive. Tell me something, what challenges did you face in both of those campaigns and in both of those positions?
Well, it was one of expectation and uncertainty, because at the time we had never elected an African American to a truly political office of that nature in Montgomery County. We had elected, I think, a person to the school board, but no one to the General Assembly, no one to the county council.
Okay.
And so when I thought about it, and I never envisioned that I would actually run for office myself. In fact, what I did was to form an organization to encourage minorities generally to run for public office, to be engaged, to be a part of the system, to work constructively within the system itself.
Okay.
And so after forming the organization and encouraging people to run for office, everyone turned to me and said, well, you know, you're the most ideal candidate we could find. You have the background, you have the temperament, you can do this. And I debated over and over and over again whether or not I would do this, because at the time I was working as a professor at Howard University Law School. I had been, at least at that time, I was the chairman of the County's Human Relations Commission, and I had the foggiest idea about running for political office, especially in Montgomery County. And probably one of the reasons why was because I looked at it as such a daunting task. You know, the African American population at that time was about 6%, and I said to myself, boy, if I quadruple that 6% and have the former mayor of Chicago, Bill Daley, counting the votes for me, there's no way for me to win with that. You know, so I said, I'm not doing this. And people like Roscoe Nix and others said, no, you should do it. You are the ideal candidate. If anyone could make this breakthrough, you're the person to do it. And besides, you formed this organization with the idea of encouraging people what a role model it would be for you to do this.
Absolutely.
And so I decided to do it.
Okay.
And I had trepidations about it. But the wonderful thing about it, it was not so much about me per se, it was more about the spirit and the heart and the people of Montgomery County, because they welcomed the campaign, they embraced it, they far and beyond fulfilled my expectation in terms of how they embraced the campaign. And so what I thought would be a more difficult campaign in terms of what the reaction would be turned out to be a very positive one. And people were there to vote for someone on the merits, someone who spoke to the issues that they were concerned about. And I think it's more of a statement of the people of Montgomery County and the kind of community that we live in, as opposed to the fact that I was running as the first African American.
Many say that your political demeanor is very calm, cool, and non-confrontational. Would you agree with that? And if so, how has it helped you to accomplish everything that you have?
Well, it depends on the day of the week or the hour of the moment. Yeah, it is.
Okay.
I just think that the confrontational style is not productive and is inconsistent with everything that I've been reared to understand and to do as a young person up to this point in life. And it has been one that I think has provided, at least for me, a level of success. First of all, if you're confrontational, it means that there are winners and losers.
Right.
And I like to leave a situation where they're all winners.
Right.
That everyone could walk away saying that we got the best out of this under the circumstances and conditions. And that's the most important thing that I try to convey, that you want as many winners. Now, that's not always possible. That's sometimes naive to think that, but you shoot for that as a goal. And if you have that as a goal, more than likely you will achieve that, as opposed to picking winners and losers. And then secondly, you leave this lasting impact that you have to keep in mind, that especially in life and especially in the political process, that you're likely to see the same people over and over and over again. And you're likely to deal with some of the same issues over and over and over again.
That's true.
So if I'm going to win with you today, I may lose against you tomorrow. And I have to engage you in certain issues over a period of time. And at some point in time, the law of averages will catch up with me, and I'm going to be on the opposite side of that. And so you don't have these lasting confrontations that leaves ill feelings, because it is not a one-shot effort. It is a continuous effort of dealing with many of the same people over and over and over again.
Absolutely. You've done a lot of good and positive things for our county, to say the least. What plans do you have for your remaining years in office?
Well, you know, I don't look at it as an achievement or a legacy for me personally. I try to approach this from what have we achieved together as a county. One of the things that I prided myself in is to provide the county with the direction and sustainability so that we can do many things. The economic challenge that we've faced over the last few years has been a monumental task. And to get through that as well as we've gotten through it as a county, and to ensure now that we have a stable educational system, that our public safety is wonderful, that we have all of the environmental concerns that have been dealt with, and we've managed our finance, I think has been a monumental success for me and I think for this county. And to do that in the way that we've done it over these few years, I think is a remarkable achievement. That provides the foundation to do many other things. Now, you could point to particular things that we've been so engaged in, like the life sciences. We have provided a foundation for this county that will continue to emerge from years and years and years to come. What we provide in terms of educational funding that allows this county to be one of the best in the entire country. What we are now doing, for example, is the Smart Growth Initiative in the midsection of the county. And there's so many other particular things that we could look at to point to and say these things are successful. The White Flint Project, the new Science City that we have, the East County sector that we have. All of those things help to make Montgomery County what it is today and provides the foundation for the future. But unless you get the very fundamental things correct, to place us in a position of sustainability, you're not able to achieve those things. And so the foundation for that is to provide a budgetary foundation, a foundational setting that maintains our AAA bond ratings, that gives us the opportunity to expand and to grow with many of these other things.
Of all of the initiatives, do you have a favorite?
I think it's the Smart Growth Initiative.
I thought so. I thought so.
So some may not understand that and why that is the case. And essentially what that meant was the involvement of almost 23, 24 different pieces of land transaction that really established the foundation for so much that has occurred in Montgomery County. And when I first had the conversation with my staff, they'd come to me and said, well, we need to rebuild the police academy, the training academy. We need to find additional space for the warehouses up and around Shady Grove, and we need to do something with the detention center. All of these different pieces and so forth. So I sat around the table and I thought about it over and over and again, and finally I came up with this idea. Let's provide a master plan that moves all of these things, not simply to replace them and not simply to enhance them in place, but move them. They should not be there. We should not have liquor warehouses around some of the most valuable land that we have in Shady Grove. We should not have a public training academy in the heart of the life science center. Those things were constructed at a time when the county was much rural. That was the outer edges of Montgomery County. I want to change all of that, come up with a Smart Growth Initiative, move all of those things, and do that without costing the county money. We'll get new facilities, enhance our property base, on and on and on. And the staff looked at me like, you gotta be kidding me. This is 23, 24 different moves. There's community opposition. It's all of these things is why you can't do this. There's no way we could do that. Well, I thought about it and continued to press on that. A few months later, Diane Jones came aboard. And I mentioned this idea to Diane. And she looked at me and said, that's a brilliant idea. We should take this and run with it.
That's right.
Give me an opportunity to look at this and see what I can do with it. And amazingly, she took this idea and with her character, education, her knowledge, her political background, all of those things working together, she's been able to pull this thing off. And so it is a real crown jewel that people don't see that well because it's so many different pieces, but it is a remarkable transformation and will have lasting benefits for years and years to come.
And see, I think that that's the vision that you have to have, is what you see down the road, not just now, but what you see for years to come.
Some say it's stupidity to say you're going to do all this. It's not just vision.
You've had to tackle actually some really very difficult and challenging budget choices, and we talked a little bit about that earlier over the past several years. So facing those enormous deficits, you've successfully managed to present balanced budgets by making some very tough choices. That's just the way it is. How hard was it for you to make these decisions knowing that many of your constituents would be unhappy?
Well, you have to look at it, what is in the best interest of the county, not a particular area of the county, not particular people per se, but what is in the best interest, not only in the short term, but the long term. There are some decisions that I could have made that would have been more popular, and I could have escaped criticism as a result of that and passed it on to someone else. But to me, it would not have been the right thing to do. I wanted to make the right decisions at the right time and not pass them on to someone else. There are things that county executives have been able to do around the state of Maryland that you can pass the blame off to the state or some other person or some other entity and so forth. I wanted to make those decisions here locally. So you have to look at it not in terms of the short term, but the long term, and the primary interest is that of the county itself. And that was my guiding principle. And there were some tough decisions. Some of the toughest decisions, I think, for me was the fact that over the last few years, we've eliminated 1,254 positions. We've reduced budgetary gaps of $2.7 billion. That's billion with a B. That's an awful lot. And still maintain all of these essential services.
Yes.
Now, when you look at that and compare that to many other jurisdictions around the country, I think we've managed that very well.
Yes.
Now, the part for me that was most difficult, knowing that in that 1,254 position, you're saying no to someone who has a job or who expects a job, and that person no longer would have a job. And at some point, there are positions, but at some later point, you're actually impacting the livelihood of some person. That person has a mortgage, they have children, their expectations for college, for paying the car loans and all those things. And so when you're making those decisions, for me, it's not simply a number. It is the impact of someone's life. And I was very, very troubled with that. So I tried as best as possible to avoid actually laying people off by coming up with innovative ways to shift positions, to take advantage of retirements, early retirements, and a number of other things. But when you get that number of positions that you're going to eliminate, and we eliminated those positions, at some point, you're going to actually impact a body, a person.
Absolutely.
And for me, having to do that was probably the most difficult thing. And also knowing that some of the programs that we have in the county, whereby you see long lines at the library, that's
Right.
one thing.
Right.
Or you may see the grass not cut 5 times a year, but it's cut 4 times or 3 times.
Right.
That's one thing. But on the other side of that, it meant that, for example, someone needed services in terms of health, in terms of food, in terms of some other things that they need.
That's
Those things may not be readily available. So there are consequences on the other side of all of those numbers that I've just described. And I had a great deal of challenge to deal with that, knowing the impact of employees and the impact of the services and programs which people expect.
The old expression, heavy is the head that wears the crown, comes to mind. It really, really does. It's tough in your position.
Well, sometimes people want to take that head off, you know.
Well, no, we hope that's not going to happen. We hope that's not going to happen. One last question, Mr. Leggett. What would be your, what would be the last thing that you would like to say about what you've done in the county? Something that will speak to, those that are listeners or our viewers. Leave them something lasting.
He did a very good job. He did it on behalf of the county.
Okay.
He has done it for a long period of time, and his interest was, in fact, and will always be Montgomery County, not just today, but for many years to come. It doesn't mean I not make mistakes, but I think that in this day and age, people say to me, this is the wrong time to be county executive. And you can look at that politically, and that very well may be right. But I think it is the most important time to be county executive, because you got to make some very tough decisions. You don't have an opportunity to get a do-over. You got to make the right decisions, and you got to do it right the first time. And I think in many cases, I've done it right, and I've done it right the first time.
You have done it right, and you've done it right the first time. This has been a wonderful opportunity. Thank you for coming on the show. We do appreciate it. And you'll have to come back so we can really have a good talk. Unfortunately, that's about all we have time for today. I want to thank Ike Leggett for taking the time to join us. I'm Deborah Milo. Please join us again next month for another edition of Mosaic, an African American Perspective.